and welcome to today's lesson on polynomial and rational expressions. This is going to cover topics under the standard 1.2a and b in Algebra 2, and then also that study island lesson that's called polynomial and rational expressions. So as you're going along today, just make sure that you're taking notes, and if I happen to go too fast, you can pause and rewind, and then you can even see how well you're doing with these questions by pausing at the beginning, working it out yourself, and then using the video to check yourself. So I'm so glad that you're here and making time for this, and let's go ahead and take some notes. When we are adding and subtracting expressions, we're going to be combining like terms. And remember, a like term is something that has the exact same variable with the exact same exponent. And so example here, this has an x cubed and this has an x cubed. So those would be like terms. And so here it's addition. So there's nothing tricky about it. I'm just going to be adding what's in these parentheses with what's in these parentheses. So my 4x to the fourth, it's the only one. There's no x to the fourth in my second set, so I have nothing to add it to. So I just write 4x to the fourth. And then I have the x cubed, and I have an x cubed here. So I'm going to be adding 4 plus a negative 5, which is negative 1x cubed. That 1 is optional. And then I have negative 19x squared, and then I have a positive 14x squared. When I add those two numbers, I get negative 5x squared. And then next I have my x. And it's the only x, because I don't have any x's in the second part, so I just have a minus 9x. And then my last one is my minus 5 here. It's my only number, so I just continue to have a minus 5. And so here I've combined all my like terms, so that's going to be my final answer, which is C. Here, once again, I'm adding. So I'm going to have the like term of x cubed and x cubed. And so 6x cubed plus 4x cubed is 10x cubed. Next, I'm going to look at my x squareds. I have a negative 3x squared, and that's my only x squared term. So I'm just going to have minus 3x squared. There's nothing to combine it with. Next, I'm going to look at my x terms. Notice I'm going down. I started with x cubed and then x squared, and now I'm looking at my x's. That's the only one. There's nothing to combine it with, so it just stays a minus 5x. Always make sure that that this minus sign stays with that minus 5x. Okay, if it was a plus, it would stay a plus. Make sure you're being consistent and not changing anything. And then my next one is I'm looking at my numbers, which is 6 and 2. 6 plus 2 is 8, which now I don't have any more like terms to combine, so my final answer is C. And so now we're looking at subtraction between the parentheses. So you can, if you remember that it's subtraction, you can leave it like this, or I prefer to rewrite it without the parentheses. So that means that first part is going to be the same. But when I drop the parentheses, I have to show that I'm subtracting both of these parts. And so here I'm going to have a minus 2x, and then I'm going to have a minus the positive 30y. And now I just go ahead and combine like terms. I have a 47x and a minus 2x to combine for 45x. And then I have an 88y and a minus 30y to combine, and that's going to leave me with 58y. And I can't combine any more like terms, so my final answer is B. So here I want to go ahead and simplify the following expression, and it's telling me to subtract these two sets of parentheses. So I'm going to go ahead, when it's subtraction, I'm going to rewrite this without my parentheses. And that's because I want to be able to keep track of all my signs. And when I write that down, it's a lot easier than trying to keep track of it in my head. So I'm going to have a minus 3x squared here because I'm subtracting that. And I'm also subtracting a minus 9. So I'm going to have a minus 9. And remember, when you have a minus a negative here, or two minuses, that's the same as just adding. So I'm going to change that to an addition symbol. And it's the same thing. And so now I've just combined like terms. I'm going to start with 7x squared and minus 3x squared, which is 4x squared. And next I'm going to look at my x terms. I only have one of those, so that's going to be a minus 9x. And then I'm going to look at my regular numbers, 3 and 9, and that's 3 plus 9 is 12. And so that's going to be my final answer, which is letter A. Now we're looking and we have no operation between the parentheses, so that's an implication of multiplication. And so here I'm going to use the FOIL method to multiply this out. So that means I'm going to take the first terms times each other, which is 12p times negative 2p. It's going to be negative 24p squared. And then I'm going to do my O, which is my outer terms. So I'm going to take 12p times 7p, and that's 84pq. And then I'm going to do my inner terms, that's the I, so I'm going to take 5q times negative 2p, which is negative 10pq, putting the letters in alphabetical order. And then I'm going to do my last terms in both sets of parentheses, so 5q times 7q, which is 35q squared. And so now I'm going to look to see if there's any like terms I can combine. I have a p squared, a pq, and a q squared terms. And so the only two there I can combine are my pq terms. 84 minus 10 is 74 pq. And then I still have the plus 35 q squared at the end, and then negative 24 p squared at the beginning. And I can't combine any more like terms, so that's going to be my final answer, which is letter A. Right, this one is also multiplication because there's no symbol between the parentheses, but now I have an additional term in my second set of parentheses, but that's no biggie. That just means I'm going to distribute the 2x to all three parts, and then I'm going to distribute my 4 to all three parts. So I'm going to take 2x times 5x squared, which is 10x cubed. I'm going to take 2x times 3x, and that's a minus 3x, that's going to be minus 6x squared. And then I'm going to take 2x times the 6, which is plus 12x. And then I'm going to do 4 times 5x squared is plus 20x squared. And then 4 times 3x is a minus 12x. And then 4 times 6 is a plus 24. And so that's the multiplication part. And now I'm going to look at combining like terms. So this is my only 10x cubed, so that just gets copied down. And then I'm looking at, I have my x squared here, and I have an x squared here. Negative 6 plus 20 is positive 14x squared. And so I had x cubed, I have x squared. So now I'm going to look at my x's. I have a 12x and a minus 12x. 12 minus 12 is 0, so they cancel out. And so I don't have any x's to write here. And then I'm going to see if I have any numbers I can combine. 24 is my only number, so that just goes on at the end. And it looks like letter C is my final answer. So now we're looking at division. So I want to go ahead and break this fraction up into 3 separate fractions. So I'm basically just putting the denominator under all 3 terms, just so it's easier for me to see what I can simplify. So in my first fraction here, I don't have any numbers to try to simplify because there's nothing on top. So that 3 is just going to stay in the denominator. And then I have m's. I have 4 m's on the top and 2 on the bottom. So those 2 are going to cancel out, and I'm left with with 2 on the top, so I'm just left with 2 on the top. You can also think of that as subtracting the exponents. 4 minus 2 is 2. 4 was bigger and it's on top, so I put my answer on top. And then here I have an invisible 1 as my power, and 3 minus 1 is 2, and my bigger exponent was on top, so n to the second goes on top. Okay, so then I look at my next one. 24 over 3, that's going to reduce to 8. So 24 divided by 3 is 8 either way. And then I'm going to have m over 2. And 3 minus 2 is 1, so I'm left with a single m on top. And then 2 minus 1 is 1, and I'm left with a regular n on top. And that one's completely simplified. And I just do it with the third one also. So 9 over 3, that's going to simplify to 3. And then n squared over n squared, 2 minus 2, if you subtract the exponents, is 0. So those are going to cancel out. And then n over n cancels out also, so I'm just left with the 3. So that means my final answer here is B. So I did the same thing here, is I broke up the fraction, which is a division problem, so that I have 3 separate fractions just to make it easier for me to reduce. And they all have that same denominator of 3x. So in my first part here, the 3's are going to cancel. I'm left with x cubed over x. So I subtract those exponents. 3 minus 1 is 2. So I have x squared for my first term, plus. Next we have 24 over 3. That's going to simplify to 8. And then I have x squared over x on the denominator. 2 minus 1 is 1. So I'm going to be left with just an x in this term. And then I have 6 divided by 3, which is 2, and that's still a minus 2. And then the x's are just going to cancel. So that's going to be my final answer, which is letter B. And if you look here, there's no 1, but that's just because it's assumed. When you have a 1, a lot of times in math, you just assume that it's there. And so that's always the case here. So here I'm dividing 2 fractions. Remember, the rule for dividing fractions is to multiply and flip the second. So my first fraction, the top one's going to stay the same. And then I want to change it to multiplication, and I'm going to flip my second fraction. So now, instead of having 15m over 16, I have a 16 over 5m. So now I'm just going to multiply my 2 fractions across. 5m times 16 is 80m. And then 8 times 15m is 120m. And so now I just need to simplify that fraction. Well, I see that they both end in 0, so I'm going to divide out 10 of both of them. So 80 divided by 10 is 8m. And then 120 divided by 10 is 12m. And then I have, to reduce that, the m's cancel, and 8 over 12, that's going to reduce to 2/3, and that makes my final answer B. Thank you for joining us today, and I hope you learned something new.